Most people want progress to be loud. They want applause, recognition, and validation to accompany every step they take. They want to be seen as ambitious, successful, and ahead of the curve. But the truth is, the loud path is fragile. The quiet path is durable. Think of compound interest. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps working in the background, quietly multiplying until one day it becomes almost impossible to ignore. People call it magic, but there's nothing magical about it. It's just quiet persistence stretched over time. The same applies to building yourself. When you build yourself quietly, you're not seeking an audience, you're seeking growth. You're not focused on signaling progress, you're focused on actually making progress. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. The loud builder needs constant reinforcement. The quiet builder creates reinforcement from within. Noise is seductive, posting every win online, talking endlessly about plans, announcing resolutions. These things feel good, but they create pressure. The moment you're loud about your goals, the world starts holding you accountable, not for your growth, but for your image. That accountability often suffocates patience, and patience is the foundation of all real growth. Quiet builders don't fear obscurity. They understand that obscurity is a gift because it allows you to make mistakes without the world watching. It allows you to refine your craft, to sharpen your skills, and to discover who you are without the distraction of applause or criticism. There's a famous idea in investing. The best returns often come from doing nothing. Not reacting to every market movement, not chasing every opportunity, but sitting still and letting time do the heavy lifting. In life, the same principle applies. Building quietly means you don't react to every distraction or trend. You sit still, you stay consistent, and you let time amplify your work. The loud path is about being impressive. The quiet path is about being valuable. Impressive fades quickly, valuable compounds. When you see someone who seems to have suddenly achieved success, what you're really seeing is the public unveiling of years spent in quiet building. The overnight success is just the final chapter of a very long, very quiet book. So build yourself quietly. Learn quietly, save quietly, fail quietly, improve quietly, and one day the results will make the noise for you. Compounding is one of those ideas that everyone has heard of, yet very few truly understand in a deep way. People nod when they hear about it in finance. They recognize the word in school textbooks, but they rarely connect it to their own lives. Compounding is not just about money. It's about effort, habits, learning, relationships, health, and character. And the most fascinating thing about compounding is that it works silently. It does not announce its presence, it does not reward you immediately, and it does not make you feel accomplished in the short term. In fact, in the beginning, compounding feels like nothing is happening at all. You put in the work, and the result looks invisible. You invest time into something, and the progress looks disappointing. That's why so many people quit before compounding has a chance to reveal its power. Imagine planting a tree. On the first day, it looks like just a seed in the soil. For weeks, maybe months, nothing seems to change. You water it, you nurture it, but you don't see much difference. Most people lose interest during this stage. They stop watering because they can't stand the quietness of growth. But if you keep going, something remarkable happens. The seed sprouts, then it grows a little stem, then leaves, and eventually, over years, it becomes a strong tree that provides shade, fruits, and stability. The growth looks slow until one day it looks obvious. That's compounding. What started silently in the soil becomes unstoppable when given time. The same happens in personal growth. You read for 10 minutes a day, and it doesn't seem like much. You exercise for 20 minutes, and nothing dramatic happens. You save a small portion of your income, and the account balance still looks modest. But when you do these things consistently for years, the results are extraordinary. The 10 minutes of reading become thousands of hours of knowledge, shaping your perspective and decisions in ways you could never anticipate. The 20 minutes of exercise add up to health, strength, and longevity. The small savings snowball into wealth and freedom. Each of these things started quietly, almost invisibly, and became unstoppable through patience. The problem is, our culture celebrates loudness. It celebrates the big announcement, the flashy transformation, the overnight success story. But those things are misleading because behind every overnight success is often a decade of quiet compounding that no one saw. People see the explosion, but not the fuse that burned silently for years. This is why compounding is both powerful and misunderstood. It doesn't give you instant gratification, and in a world addicted to immediate results, it feels unsatisfying. Think about learning a skill. Say you decide to learn a new language. At first, it feels overwhelming. You learn a few words, you memorize some phrases, but it feels useless. You can't hold a conversation, you can't read fluently, and you wonder if it's worth it. Most people quit here, but if you stick to it every day, quietly practicing, quietly absorbing, something changes. Months later, you realize you can understand simple conversations. A year later, you can think in that language. Years later, you can travel, connect, and work with people you never could before. The transformation feels sudden, but it was just compounding working silently until it became visible. The same logic applies to relationships. Trust, loyalty, and depth are not built in a single conversation. They are built quietly over hundreds of small interactions, consistent acts of reliability, and moments of honesty. Every text you answer, every promise you keep, every time you listen instead of interrupting, it compounds. Over years, these small actions become the foundation of relationships that feel unshakable. The people who only chase grand gestures often miss this truth. They try to be loud in their displays of affection or loyalty, but relationships are sustained by the quiet compounding of everyday consistency. Health is another silent compounding machine. Eating one healthy meal doesn't matter. Going to the gym once doesn't matter. Sleeping early one night doesn't matter. But repeating those small actions consistently, quietly, without needing recognition or validation, transforms the trajectory of your health. The body keeps score even when no one is watching. Years later, when others start struggling with energy, illnesses, or fatigue, the quiet compounding of your habits becomes visible in your resilience, strength, and vitality. Even character compounds quietly. Every decision to tell the truth, every moment you choose discipline over distraction, every time you resist shortcuts, these things accumulate. No one claps for them, no one notices them in the moment, but they are shaping who you are becoming. One day, people will look at you and say you have integrity, discipline, wisdom, but they won't realize that these qualities were not built in a single defining moment. They were compounded quietly over thousands of small choices. Noise tempts us because it feels like progress. Posting about your new project online feels like you're building something. Telling people about your goals feels like you're taking action, but often this is just borrowed confidence. The quiet builder doesn't need noise. They don't need constant updates, validation, or applause. They trust compounding. They know that while nothing seems to be happening on the surface, everything is happening beneath it. Compounding is also unstoppable once it gains momentum. In the beginning, it looks like nothing. In the middle, it feels slow, but in the end, it looks like magic. The numbers, the progress, the impact, it all accelerates beyond imagination. The key is that you don't get to see this power unless you embrace the quiet phase. The phase where nothing seems to be happening, but everything is actually happening. Think of an ice cube in a cold room. You increase the temperature 1 degree at a time. At first, nothing changes. It goes from 25 degrees F to 26 degrees F, still frozen. 27 degrees F, 28 degrees F, 29 degrees F, still nothing. You keep going, and people might laugh, wondering why you're wasting your effort. Then it hits 32 degrees F, and suddenly the ice begins to melt. People call it sudden, but it wasn't sudden. Every single degree mattered. Every quiet step of progress brought you closer. That's compounding. So when you're building yourself, remember that compounding is silent but unstoppable. You won't always see the results right away, and the world won't applaud you while you're in the invisible stages. But if you keep going, quietly, steadily, without seeking noise or recognition, you'll reach a point where the results cannot be ignored. Patience has always been the rarest form of capital. Everyone knows its value, but very few people are willing to hold it long enough to see it work. In a world that rewards speed, attention, and constant updates, patience often looks like weakness. People who are quiet about what they are building are often misunderstood as unambitious or slow. But silence is what protects patience. It creates a shield around your work, allowing you to focus on the process without being rushed by other people's expectations. When you speak loudly about your goals, you invite pressure. You might tell friends about a project you're working on, announce it publicly, or share updates constantly to keep people interested. At first, it feels exciting. People cheer you on, they admire your ambition, and they reinforce your confidence. But then something subtle happens. The more people know, the more you start to feel watched. Their eyes become a kind of deadline. Their curiosity turns into weight on your shoulders. Every delay feels embarrassing. Every mistake feels magnified. And suddenly your focus shifts from doing the work to managing appearances. You're no longer building with patience. You're performing with urgency. Silence removes that. When you keep your goals to yourself, you have the freedom to move at your own pace. You can make mistakes in private, adjust quietly, and experiment without fear of judgment. You don't feel the constant pull of comparison because no one knows enough to compare. Silence gives you the breathing room to let patience unfold naturally. It's like planting seeds in a private garden. No one stands over your shoulder asking when the plants will bloom, so you're free to let nature take its course. Patience is often destroyed not by lack of discipline but by excess noise. The more you broadcast, the more people expect, and the more people expect, the more tempted you are to cut corners just to look like you're progressing. The danger of living loudly is that you start optimizing for optics instead of outcomes. You make choices not because they're right, but because they look impressive. In the short run, it feels good. In the long run, it corrodes patience and leads to fragile results. Think about how children learn. A child doesn't walk the first time they try. They stumble, fall, and try again, often hundreds of times. No one pressures them to post their attempts or explain their progress. They're given the space to fail quietly, and because they have that quiet, they develop the patience required to keep going until they succeed. Imagine if a child learning to walk had to face daily commentary, external timelines, or social judgment. The frustration would multiply and patience would collapse. Adults are no different. We need silence to create the conditions for patience to survive. There's a reason some of the most enduring work in history was created in obscurity. Writers draft their books quietly for years before publishing. Scientists labor in labs without anyone paying attention until their discoveries are ready. Athletes train in private before they perform in public. What looks like sudden brilliance is really just patience protected by silence. The world only sees the result because the process was hidden, and that hiding allowed the process to mature at its own pace. When you are quiet about your journey, you also protect yourself from unnecessary comparisons. The loud builder is constantly measured against others. Who's faster? Who's bigger? Who's more impressive? This comparison eats away at patience because it creates urgency where there doesn't need to be any. But in silence, you only compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That shift gives you the patience to move forward without feeling like you're behind. Progress becomes internal, not external. Patience also thrives when there's no spotlight. Imagine cooking a meal on low heat. It takes time, but the flavors develop deeply. If you keep opening the pot to show people, you lose the heat and the process slows down. Worse, you might feel tempted to crank up the heat to impress others, and in doing so, you ruin the meal. Building yourself is no different. Silence is the lid that keeps the heat in. It gives patience the conditions to transform ordinary ingredients into something extraordinary. Another way silence protects patience is by removing unnecessary expectations of perfection. When no one knows what you're working on, you feel free to experiment, to fail, to take detours. You can scrap an idea and start over without embarrassment. You can admit to yourself that something isn't working without worrying about disappointing an audience. This freedom keeps you patient because you know mistakes won't cost you your reputation. The moment you go loud, every misstep feels like a blow to your credibility. Silence eliminates that weight, leaving you room to breathe and to wait for the right time. People often underestimate how long meaningful growth takes. They think a year of effort should show extraordinary results, when in reality, 5 or 10 years may be needed for true mastery or transformation. Impatience kills potential long before failure does. And the best antidote to impatience is quiet. When you're not pressured to deliver on someone else's timeline, you can stick to your own. When you're not explaining yourself constantly, you can refine quietly until the work is undeniable. Consider the story of bamboo. For years after being planted, bamboo doesn't seem to grow much at all. It remains just a small shoot, barely changing, while other plants around it flourish quickly. People who don't understand bamboo might assume it's weak or slow. But what's happening underground is powerful. Its roots are spreading wide and deep, preparing to support rapid growth. Then one year, almost suddenly, the bamboo shoots up, growing feet in just weeks. But it wasn't sudden, it was years of silent patience. That's what silence does. It gives you time to grow roots without being judged for how tall you look on the surface. In a noisy world, silence feels countercultural. Everyone is rushing to be seen, to share, to announce. But silence is where patience finds shelter. It's where you can protect yourself from distractions, from timelines that don't belong to you, and from the pressure of looking successful before you're ready. It's where long-term progress can mature without interference. And when the time comes, what you've built quietly will be revealed, and people will call it patience, discipline, or wisdom, without realizing that what you really protected was your silence. Most people fear obscurity. They treat it as something to escape from as quickly as possible, as if being unknown is a sign of failure. In reality, obscurity is one of the greatest advantages you can ever have. It gives you the freedom to experiment, to make mistakes without the spotlight, and to refine yourself quietly without anyone keeping score. Once you step into visibility, every action is magnified, every choice is scrutinized, and the margin for error shrinks dramatically. Obscurity, in contrast, gives you space. It gives you time. It gives you the ability to practice in private before anyone is paying attention. Think of an artist. The early sketches, the discarded drafts, the messy experiments. These are never meant to be seen by the world. They are private rehearsals. They allow the artist to stretch their imagination, to try outrageous ideas, to fail hundreds of times before finding one expression worth keeping. Imagine if every flawed sketch were judged by critics. The artist would lose courage. They would become conservative, afraid to look foolish. But in obscurity, there is no critic. There is only the artist and the canvas. That is the gift of hidden seasons. They give you permission to be bold because no one is watching. The same applies to entrepreneurs. The first versions of any product are clumsy, incomplete, even embarrassing. Early experiments are full of mistakes, and early strategies often collapse under their own weight. But obscurity protects these fragile beginnings. When nobody knows you, nobody cares if you fail. This anonymity becomes a shield. It allows you to test ideas, learn lessons, and pivot without public shame. By the time people notice you, the rough edges are gone, the mistakes have been corrected, and the foundation has been laid strong. What looks like sudden success is really years of protected failures hidden beneath the surface. Athletes, too, benefit from obscurity. Before they ever play in front of thousands, they practice in empty gyms, in quiet fields, in lonely training grounds. These unseen hours are where they can miss shots, trip, stumble, and get back up without humiliation. If every mistake had been made under a spotlight, the pressure would suffocate growth. But obscurity offers cover. It creates an environment where mistakes are not just tolerated, they are necessary. Only later, when the athlete is ready, do they step into the lights. The gift of obscurity is that it buys you time to become ready. There's a misconception that obscurity means insignificance. People think that if no one notices their work, then their work must not matter. But obscurity is not insignificance, it is incubation. It is the quiet season where roots grow underground before the tree breaks the surface. It's where skills are sharpened, ideas are refined, and character is tested. Just because no one sees it doesn't mean it isn't happening. In fact, some of the most important transformations happen precisely when no one is watching. Obscurity also liberates you from comparison. When you are visible, you're constantly measured against others. You feel the weight of competition, the fear of being behind, the need to prove yourself. But in obscurity, none of that exists. You are free to focus on your own lane, your own process, your own timeline. This independence fuels deeper growth because you're not distracted by trying to look like someone else. You can be patient, you can be authentic, and you can develop in ways that visibility rarely allows. The irony is that once people escape obscurity, many of them wish they could return. Public attention feels intoxicating at first, but over time it becomes constraining. Every word is judged, every action is dissected, and mistakes are amplified beyond proportion. Many successful people look back fondly at their hidden years, when they could take risks without headlines, when they could experiment without criticism, when they could fail quietly and move on. That's when their best growth happened, but they didn't realize it until later. History is full of examples of people who used obscurity wisely. Writers who filled notebooks with drafts long before they published their first book. Musicians who played in small, empty bars before selling out stadiums. Innovators who worked out of garages and basements before launching companies that changed the world. None of these stories would exist without obscurity. The small beginnings, the hidden years, the unnoticed efforts. These were not obstacles. They were opportunities. Obscurity is also a filter. It tests your intentions. When no one is watching, why do you keep going? If you are motivated only by recognition, obscurity will expose it. You'll give up because the applause isn't there. But if you're motivated by genuine passion, by curiosity, by a love of the craft, then obscurity strengthens you. It clarifies that you are not doing this for validation. You are doing it because you can't not do it. That purity becomes the foundation of work that endures once visibility finally arrives. Think of obscurity as rehearsal. No actor walks onto a stage without countless hours of practice behind closed doors. No musician records a masterpiece without rehearsing endlessly in private. The hidden season is where you learn the lines, where you discover your rhythm, where you fix your mistakes. The performance is just the reveal. The quality of the performance depends entirely on how well you used your obscurity. One of the dangers of today's culture is that obscurity is shrinking. Social media tempts people to share everything, even their earliest drafts, their smallest experiments, their rawest thoughts. The result is that the line between practice and performance is blurred. People are judged before they're ready, criticized before they've grown, pressured before they've matured. In rushing to escape obscurity, they rob themselves of its gift. They forfeit the freedom to fail quietly, and without that freedom, patience collapses and progress stalls. There's a lesson in how nature operates. Seeds germinate underground. Caterpillars transform in cocoons. Minerals form under immense pressure deep inside the earth before they become diamonds. All of this happens in obscurity. None of it is visible, and yet all of it is necessary. If you interrupt these processes too soon, you ruin them. If you force them into visibility before they are ready, they collapse. Human growth follows the same law. The hidden season is not a delay, it is the process itself. So many people are desperate to be seen, not realizing that being unseen is their advantage. Obscurity gives you the runway to stumble, to adjust, to figure things out without the weight of an audience. It gives you privacy to refine not only your craft but also yourself. It gives you the chance to answer questions like, what do I really value? What do I really want? What kind of person am I becoming? These are questions you can only wrestle with honestly when no one else is watching. By the time visibility comes, if you've used obscurity well, you are strong. You've built resilience through failure, wisdom through experimentation, and confidence through practice. The world will think you emerged suddenly, but you will know the truth. You were hidden for years, and in that hiddenness, you were being forged. There is a difference between looking successful and being successful. One is about appearances, the other is about substance. Impressions are quick, loud, and fragile. Value is slow, quiet, and durable. You can impress someone in a moment with a clever line, an expensive purchase, or a grand gesture, but the feeling fades as quickly as it appeared. Value, on the other hand, compounds. It grows deeper with time. It doesn't fade after the applause dies down. It doesn't vanish when trends change. It lingers because it's rooted in something real. In every field, there are people who chase impressions and people who build value. The first group looks exciting in the beginning. They talk loudly about what they're doing, they dress the part, they chase recognition. But over time, the glow fades. They can't sustain the image because there isn't enough substance behind it. The second group looks quiet at first, almost invisible. They're not busy trying to look important, they're busy becoming useful. They learn, they build, they practice, and though no one notices them at the start, their value compounds until it's impossible to ignore. Think about relationships. Impressions might win attention in the short run. A charming introduction, a grand romantic gesture, a bold promise. But what sustains a relationship is value. Value is consistency, reliability, trustworthiness, kindness. You can impress someone once, but you have to bring value every day. A relationship built on impressions burns brightly at first, but fizzles out quickly. A relationship built on value deepens with time, growing stronger instead of weaker. The same principle shows up in work. Employees who chase impressions spend energy on looking busy, saying the right words in meetings, or drawing attention to small wins. They might impress their boss for a while, but eventually impressions wear thin. On the other hand, employees who focus on value-solving problems, helping others, building skills, become indispensable. They might not get noticed immediately, but their value compounds until they are the person everyone relies on. When promotions or opportunities arrive, value always outlasts impression. In money, too, this principle is clear. People can spend money to create impressions, cars, clothes, gadgets. It looks impressive for a moment, but it doesn't last. The shine wears off, the crowd forgets, and the object loses its appeal. Value, however, comes from using money in ways that grow. Investing, saving, creating. Value builds freedom, security, and opportunities. It compounds quietly, and while it may not look impressive in the short term, over the long term it changes everything. The temptation to chase impressions is strong because the rewards are immediate. Post something flashy online and you get likes within minutes. Wear something expensive and people compliment you instantly. Share a bold plan and you're praised for ambition, but these rewards are shallow. They fade quickly and they force you to chase the next impression to feel relevant again. It becomes a cycle of trying to stay visible rather than trying to become valuable. The problem is, impressions don't compound. They expire. Value, in contrast, is slower. It doesn't give you quick dopamine hits. You don't get applause for reading a book, for practicing quietly, for saving a little money, for exercising daily. You don't get recognition for being reliable, for helping others when no one is watching, for showing restraint when you could show off. But all of those actions build value, and value compounds. One book leads to perspective, then another leads to insight, and over time you become wise. One act of discipline leads to strength, then another builds resilience, and over time you become unshakable. Each choice seems small in the moment, but together they create a foundation that outlasts any impression. Another difference between value and impression is durability under pressure. When difficulties come, impressions collapse. The flashy resume that looked impressive won't matter if the person can't handle challenges. The charm that dazzled at first won't sustain a relationship through hard seasons. The material symbols of wealth won't protect against financial instability, but value holds. Skills, character, resilience, relationships built on trust. These things endure stress. They don't crumble because they were never built on appearances. Think of two houses, one built quickly with cheap materials and a shiny exterior, the other built slowly with solid foundations and quality work. The first house impresses immediately. It looks finished, glamorous, ready to show off. The second looks plain at first, maybe even delayed. But when storms come, the flashy house begins to fall apart while the solid one stands firm. That's the difference between impression and value. One fades under pressure, the other endures. You can also see this in how people remember others. Very few people are remembered for how impressive they looked. They are remembered for the value they brought. Teachers who change lives are remembered not because they impressed their students, but because they gave them tools, encouragement, and perspective that lasted. Friends are remembered not for the one flashy gift they gave, but for the hundreds of small times they showed up when needed. Leaders are remembered not for speeches that dazzled, but for decisions that made life better for others. Value is what remains when impressions fade. In careers, the trap of chasing impressions is everywhere. People decorate resumes with buzzwords, attend conferences to be seen, announce projects they haven't finished. All of this might impress someone for a short time, but it rarely lasts. Value is different. It comes from actually doing the work, from developing real competence, from building something useful. When value is there, you don't need to shout about it. People find you. Opportunities find you. Value speaks for itself in ways impressions never can. The compounding nature of value also means that small contributions add up. One person who consistently helps others in small ways becomes trusted. One writer who produces thoughtful work steadily over years becomes respected. One investor who saves quietly and avoids reckless risks becomes wealthy. Nothing about this is flashy. Nothing about it screams for attention. But with time, the accumulation of small acts of value becomes enormous. That is why value outlasts impression, because value builds layer upon layer, while impression resets every time you chase it. There's also an honesty to value. Impressions can be faked. You can look richer than you are, busier than you are, smarter than you are, but value cannot be faked for long. You either have it or you don't, and once you have it, no one can take it from you. Skills, wisdom, trust, resilience, these stay with you regardless of circumstances. Even if you lose the platform, the applause, or the spotlight, value remains. That permanence makes it infinitely more powerful than impression. When you build value, you're building something for the long term. You're not chasing today's recognition. You're investing in tomorrow's impact. You might not get credit today, you might not look impressive right now, but the return on value always arrives eventually. People discover your reliability when they need help. They discover your skill when they face a challenge. They discover your wisdom when they're searching for direction. And by then, impressions don't matter, because value is the only thing that lasts. There is a strange irony in life. The people who talk the most about what they're going to do are rarely the ones who end up doing it, and the people who say the least often have the strongest results. Noise feels powerful in the moment. It gives the illusion of progress, the sense that you are already halfway to your goal just by announcing it. But noise is temporary. It can't substitute for results. Results, on the other hand, don't need explanation. They don't need self-promotion. They are self-evident. When results are real, they speak louder than any noise you could have made along the way. The temptation to make noise is natural. People want to be seen as ambitious, as hardworking, as someone with a vision. They want reassurance that what they're doing matters. So they broadcast, they post updates, they share their plans, they talk about the hustle. It feels productive, but it's not. All it does is borrow recognition in advance. The problem with borrowed recognition is that it creates pressure to perform before you're ready. Once people expect something from you, you start rushing, cutting corners, or abandoning patience to satisfy the attention you've created. And very often, the noise outpaces the results. The quiet builder takes the opposite approach. They don't feel the need to announce every move because they understand that results are the only proof that matters. They know that if they are consistent, if they keep stacking small wins, if they keep working when no one is watching, eventually the results will show themselves. And when they do, those results create more credibility, more respect, and more impact than any amount of noise ever could. Consider athletes. The loudest ones often talk about what they're going to achieve, how they're training harder than anyone else, how they're destined to win. But when the competition begins, all that matters is performance. The scoreboard has no room for noise. It records only results, and history doesn't remember the loud declarations. It remembers the quiet competitors who let their achievements speak for them. In business, the same pattern shows up. Companies that spend all their energy making noise about how innovative they are often fail to deliver lasting value. Marketing and hype might capture attention temporarily, but if the product isn't good, the noise collapses. Meanwhile, companies that quietly build, refine, and focus on creating something valuable often rise unexpectedly. They may be underestimated at first, but when their results become visible, they can't be ignored. The market doesn't care about noise, it rewards results. Even in personal growth, results speak louder than anything you could say. You don't need to announce that you're disciplined if you actually are. Your life will show it. You don't need to tell people you're becoming wiser if your decisions reflect it. You don't need to proclaim that you're working hard if the outcomes of your work are undeniable. In time, results reveal what words can't hide. People might doubt your promises, but they can't doubt what they see with their own eyes. Noise is fleeting because it depends on perception. Results are lasting because they create evidence. You can impress someone with words for a day, but you can't sustain an impression without proof. Proof is what endures, proof is what builds trust, and proof only comes from results. That's why quiet building is so powerful. It delays noise until there's something real behind it. And once there's something real, you don't need to say much. The work says it for you. There's also a psychological benefit to staying quiet. Noise can trick your brain into thinking you've already accomplished something. When you tell others about your plans, you get a sense of satisfaction, as if progress has already been made. But that satisfaction is false. It reduces your drive to actually do the work. Quiet builders avoid that trap by staying focused on execution instead of explanation. They resist the dopamine hit of noise because they know the real reward is in results. Think of examples in history. The inventors who changed the world weren't the ones loudly talking about how great their inventions would be before they worked. They were the ones in workshops, in labs, in garages, building quietly until they had something real. Only then did the world hear about it, and by then the results were undeniable. The same is true for leaders, artists, athletes, thinkers. Their impact came not from their noise but from their outcomes. Noise is also fragile because it invites skepticism. The more you talk, the more people expect. The more you promise, the more opportunities you create for disappointment. But results disarm skepticism. They silence doubt. People may criticize your methods, question your intentions, or underestimate your abilities, but once the results are in front of them, arguments end. Results don't need defense. They don't require justification. They are the evidence. There's a useful analogy in farming. A farmer doesn't stand in the field shouting about how big the harvest will be. They plant quietly, water quietly, and work quietly, season after season. When the harvest comes, the results are obvious. Anyone can see them. The noise wouldn't have sped up the harvest, and it certainly wouldn't have made the crops grow. Only the work, the patience, and the consistency mattered. Life works the same way. The results are the harvest. The noise is irrelevant. Another example is in fitness. People can make noise about going to the gym, about their new diet, about their transformation plan. But months later, only results matter. The body tells the truth. You can't fake strength. You can't fake endurance. You can't fake health. Noise may distract temporarily, but results are visible in ways that words never are. Quiet building also creates a surprise effect. Because you haven't been making noise, people underestimate you. They assume you're not doing much, not making progress, not going anywhere. Then when the results appear, they seem sudden and dramatic. What looks like overnight success to others is simply the unveiling of years of hidden work. This surprise magnifies the impact of results because they arrive without warning, without hype, and without buildup. The most sustainable path is to let results do the talking. Noise fades quickly and often backfires, but results compound, and once they appear, they echo. They spread through word of mouth, through reputation, through impact. You don't need to sell them because they sell themselves. People are drawn to results because results represent reality, and reality always speaks louder than noise.